I was like on paper super happy, but I really felt empty inside, and I didn't know what this was coming from. And I realized that I was spending a lot of money and so on things to just to be happy. And yeah, relationships weren't working out. Nothing was really working out at that point. And this is where I get a calling.
Hello, everyone. I am Cindy Holmes, and I am super excited to be back here again with our podcast, Energy Healing Conversations. And today, as you all know, we're in the series of spiritual awakening stories, and I am looking forward to hearing Stephanie's story. She's going to be talking to us about burnout and life recalibration. And Stephanie, a very warm welcome to our audience. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Hamod. I am an energy coach, energy healer, a hypnotherapist, and I'm a tutor with the School of Intuition and Healing.
A very warm welcome to you. And I really want to dive deep in straight away and ask you your first question, which is really to talk about what life was like, and maybe even go a little bit back to childhood and some of the traits that kind of led you to being a high achiever. Really talk to us through that part of your story, please.
Yes, so I was the youngest of all cousins and so on. So I was really looking up to everyone, and they were all super high achievers. So the bar was very high for me. It's called unrelenting standards, as I learned afterwards and did work on myself. So yeah, I was growing up, wanting to just be the best that I could be. So I ended up moving out of Lebanon. I grew up there. There was war and so on. I moved to France, and then I moved back a few times. Anyway, I ended up doing my master's in the UK. And from there, I'm like, okay, I'm liking it here, but it's so expensive. London is so expensive. I need a job that pays out. So then I go into financial services because, as you know, it's one of the ones that pays most. And I start doing this, although my studies were in marketing and nothing to do with this. So I start working. I am the, high achiever, always a promotion, a year and a half, a promotion, and so on and so on, and move on. And then I got to be a head of department at a corporate bank. I was the youngest and female. We were only 5 female on the whole floor. And so, I had a lot of pressure. I was enjoying it, but I felt that I was empty inside. I was so busy. I was traveling. I had the most international team. I was like on paper super happy, but I really felt empty inside, and I didn't know what this was coming from. And I realized that I was spending a lot of money and so on things to just to be happy. And yeah, relationships weren't working out. Nothing was really working out at that point. And this is where I get a calling, basically, to go and learn about Ayurveda. I hadn't heard much about Ayurveda. I did a bit of meditations. I was like a bit on the path, but not so much. And then I go and I spent 3 weeks there. And, I was never taking holidays. And there I had to book 3 weeks to start learning about it. And so 3 weeks later, I'm on a plane and I get there. And this is where I get a complete reset, mind, body, and spirit, really reset. And where I found myself again.
Thank you for sharing that. I'd like to dive into a couple of like deep dive into some of what you said. So, give us kind of a little bit more around what actually led you to the course. Like, what was going on in your life? Were there specific things that were, so our audience can relate to, if they've gone through similar things? What were the symptoms? if you could just give us, or even a day or whatever, what it looked like. And then what was the, because there's that one thing, or there are things that push us into that seeking. Give us a little bit more context to that, please.
Sure. So for me, it was really this lack of happiness and this lack of meaning that was translated into not being comfortable being alone and with myself, and seeking, wanting to be busy, whether it was going shopping or traveling, or and always spending, and not like, yeah, very much going outwards, going into relationships, meeting people and so on. But nothing was really fulfilling because I didn't find myself. I wasn't happy with myself. And I was really closed off. And I was like, why are my relationships not working out? Because I was actually very closed off, although I was, at work, I was very open and so on. But inside of me, my intimacy, that was not available.
What is curious for me is so you went and you did the Vedic training, and did you go to India for that?
I went to Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, okay. And kind of what happened to you there? Talk a little bit before you move on. I'm curious, in those 3 weeks, what actually happened?
So what was very strange is that I didn't want, we were a group of 10 people doing this course, and I didn't want to be with them. I just wanted to be on my own. I didn't want to have lunch with them. I didn't want to have dinner with them. First, I felt a bit obliged and so on. And then I was like, no, I'm going to live the experience as I want to live it. And so I started spending time with myself, and I was so happy doing this. And so we were not only learning about Ayurveda, but also receiving treatments. So it was this bit that really had me change and transform. That was also meditation. We were doing yoga. We were doing all of these practices. And I had my whole suitcase was basically full of books, although I didn't touch any of them. And what was also interesting is that I went there without, generally I always had my nail polish, I had my hair straight, I was always like with makeup and stuff because of my professional role. I had to be presentable. I was always with CEOs, with high people. So I had to be much more presentable. And there, I just wanted to be there. And so, yeah, it helped me completely reset. And I found myself, and I remember calling my sister from there and saying, hey, I'm quitting my job. I'm coming back, but I'm quitting. And as soon as I quit, I'm going to come back to Sri Lanka. I'm going to volunteer, work with kids. I found myself again. I had this spark that I was back, and I was so happy with it. And I remember hearing her say, oh, but you're going to want to buy yourself stuff. You're going to want to, whatever. Think about it, ask for a sabbatical, do these things. And yeah, same with my parents. And so I got a bit influenced by them, and I carried their fears. And so I went back to my job. I talked to my boss, and I asked for a sabbatical. And it was always, yeah, when this project finishes, when we're in the phase of implementation, here's the promotion. You wanted to live in Madrid. The job is there for you. So I had a dual reporting line. I was spending 2 days in Madrid, 2 days in London, a day in the app, and the weekend, I had everything that I wanted, and yet that wasn't it. And so I started working on my transition. And it took a couple of years to do so because of all the promises, because I was like, okay, let me see if Madrid is fun, if it's fulfilling me or not. And of course it wasn't. And during this time, I was learning a lot of modalities as well.
So, Stephanie, tell us about that transition. It was, as much as your heart, from what I hear, wanted to just get off the treadmill, just step off this doing, and, because that's what it sounds. It just sounds like aeroplanes, airports, shops, one dinner to the next, to the best wine, to the best food, I'm hearing that, there's this whole lifestyle that always sounds so exciting on the outside, but, I also heard about the loneliness. And so you came back to yourself and you started. What were the modalities and what were the things that you did alongside this transitional period? Because I'm always curious around. I believe in transitions from one life to the next life within this life. I know some people do it very quickly, but I'm curious about this 2-year journey.
So I had a few different coaches from work, and I used them for my personal transformation. So that was handy. I was also meditating. I was also doing yoga. And when I felt that I really needed this reset again, but couldn't go to Sri Lanka or do this, I started juicing. So I got in touch with a professional juicer, and I started doing 3 days. And I was like, oh, I'm going to be hungry. I'm very busy. I'm always on the move. I can't do this. And then 3 days led to 5, led to 7, led to 9. And I did 3 months of juicing in the end. And that really set me, my energy levels were up through the roof. In work meetings, I was there observing, seeing what was happening. I had this energy again, this spark again, and this really helped me carry through it. I knew what was going to happen from a business perspective because I knew that there was going to be a restructure, and I thought, okay, this is going to be the time where I'm going to negotiate my exit. And so because everyone, I got along with everyone, I managed to get what I wanted. And I was very privileged in this situation. And during this time, I did a retreat in India, reconnecting with my divine feminine, because I knew that there was something wrong with that. I was dressing up in a very feminine way, but I was so much in my masculine energy. I had to be in my masculine energy. Being in an environment like this, you get killed if you're not, And so I was observing this rat race, but I was no longer in it. And this is why I managed to do that. And so when I felt that the moment was right for me, that the company was at a stage where I could negotiate my exit, I just left and I went and I moved into the Alps. And when I was doing this retreat, I received a Reiki session. I knew nothing about energy healing, but I received it, and that really changed many things for me. I cried for maybe 8 hours straight afterwards. And I understood so many things, and it was really life-changing from that point on. Fast forward 2 years, I was in the Alps. I'm going to say this because it's just incredible synchronicities. It was the middle of winter, but it was a warm, a couple of weeks, and middle of February, we're meant to have loads of snow, but no, it was very mild. So with my friends, we decided to go rock climbing instead of skiing. And so I was rock climbing, and okay, I'm not a huge rock climber, so I did what I could do. And then the rest I was on a path, on a trail. And then I was just reading there. And then this lady comes with her dog, and her dog comes to me, and I start petting the dog and so on. And she was South African, and she was a naturopath, and we started chatting and so on. And then we got in touch afterwards and so on, and exchange. It was COVID times, we were talking about vaccines, all of these things. And she told me that she had done work with Mark Bind about past lives, past life wounds, and so on. And I was like, oh, this is incredible. I'm going to try this. So I get on and I start doing sessions with Mark. I learned about my past lives. I learned about why I had so much pain here, and which is what I felt during Reiki, but I didn't know why. And so I understood where this was coming from. And it was basically a past life where I was I was killing people. It was wartime, and I was actually one of the people killing in the Middle East just before this lifetime. And this made so much sense because I understood why I decided to come back as a child in a war zone and why I lived and had to experience this. And so from that point, everything made so much sense and it really freed me. And that was the start of the journey. And so after that, I'm doing lots of courses with Mark, lots of meditations. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't have the basics, you know. What do I do with all of this? I can't do this for someone. I don't know how to handle someone. I don't know what to do. And so he introduced me to the school, and this is where I started with the 2-year course.
Oh, that's amazing. And we'll pick up on that. I want to ask a couple of things around your story, because about past life healing. And I'm just trying to make the how that led you into the superachiever. So was there something around being in a place that that was a war zone, that was a difficult place to live? Was there something about how did that link into finding yourself? If you can just give us more of, share with what you're comfortable with, but how did that releasing that past life, what were the things that shifted from high achiever to some kind of form of surrender, and also this beautiful feminine energy that seemed to be allowed in?
Absolutely. It was a surrender, as you say. Because it made sense, because I could understand where all of this was coming from. I'm like, okay, I don't need it anymore. I'm ready to let it go. And I was very privileged to be in the mountains. Mountains have always been a safe space for me. So when I was growing up and there was war where we lived, my parents, we were fortunate enough to be able to go to the mountains and have a normal life as much as possible in those circumstances. And so when I was back in London afterwards, I was really coming back to the Alps. I didn't buy anything in London. I bought a studio flat in the Alps, but that allowed me to come and feel safe in this environment. And these environments, whether it's big mountains or oceans or sea and so on, they're very humbling because you realize that you are tiny and that the forces of the universe are so bigger than you. Of nature is so much more than any egoistic person, CEO, and so on can be. And so this is where you realize, the human nature. And another element that really helped me disconnect with all of this is that I was privy to discussions with the group chairwoman of the bank that I worked with the CEO, with all of this. It was just like we were always like 5 people meeting on a very strategic project. And I was looking at them and I was like, there are no role models for me. Do I want to be like them? It's like, this is just ego talk. It's because who's got the idea? If it's not your idea and it doesn't help me politically, I'm not going to support it. And I was looking at all of this thinking, not for me. This is not for me. And so from that point on, I think that I was really centered in, reconnected with my values, and yeah.
Interesting. How did your parents respond?
So initially they were a bit scared for me. And, like financially, what are you going to do? How are you going to live and so on? And then when they saw that I was so much happier and so much myself, they just respected it. And actually, I remember because my relationship with my parents was like, okay, I have to talk to them. It's Saturday or Sunday. It's the weekend. My mom is calling. I have to pick up the phone, but I was not really, my heart wasn't there. And then now I have this incredible relationship with my mother. I went back to live with her for a year. And yeah, it's completely transformed. I've accepted the feminine in me. I've accepted this I understood where she was coming from. I understood her path and made peace with it.
Fantastic. And so, and your relationships, how has that, so your relationships with your mother, but what about your other relationships?
My other relationships were completely transformed as well because I was myself again. I was in my feminine. I was allowing the masculine to come in. I was making space for someone else, but I wasn't seeking stuff in them. You know, I was happy to be on my own. I was living in the Alps on my own. I was so happy. And a man was a plus. But if their values were not aligned with mine, then thank you, love you, but that's it. We're just going to leave it there. And so I had my longest relationships from that point on. You know, it went from a few months to counting in years.
Wonderful. Stephanie, something that the audience doesn't know and we've never spoken about. I'm curious because you love skiing, and skiing has been a massive part of your life. How did that change from when you were working in corporate versus how you ski today? Because actually, when we were talking about this, you know, we'll call your reset Alt Control Delete, and you reset. What? Because skiing is just such a, I mean, it's not my jam, but I'd be curious to know how that changed.
Very interesting question. So as a kid, I was one of the best skiers. You know, I was top skier, unrelenting standards. You know, I have to be the best. I was the best ski instructor when I was at uni. Better than you know, when we did the qualifications, I had better results than men, and I was not from the mountains, so I had also had to be imposing myself in this field again, and so on. You know, always this having to fight, having to put my masculine energy in. And then I was coming to the Alps to ski and so on. When I was back in the corporate world, it was a lot of, you know, performance and so on. And then when I moved here and got into my feminine, I was like, actually, first, I'm not going to take the ski lifts anymore if I can. So I started ski touring, which is being in contact with nature, because you're basically walking up the mountain instead of just using the lift to ski down and be the fastest and so on. So it really changed, and it stopped being a performance thing, and it started being I'm going to appreciate nature. I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to be observant. And it was becoming a mindful experience. It was becoming my meditation. And now if I, you know, there are some days where I don't ski if I don't feel like skiing. And before this was like, what? Well, there's snow, there's fresh snow. Of course you're going to ski. And yeah.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. And I guess living in Lebanon now, the snow is not available all year round, right? I mean, they have a bit of snow, but it's a completely different thing from living in the Alps.
Exactly. And I went back 20 years, you know, I hadn't skied there for 20 years. And so I went back skiing there after 20 years. And wow, I was like, "Oh, I can't do this. It's too crowded when the days are nice. I'm going to go back to just ski touring and doing it my own way." And then you meet people that are like this as well. So it changes your whole environment. Your approach to sports changes. And for me, it's really being, again, in the feminine, in the reset. Even if we're doing a masculine or a physical activity, it's like, how can I stay true to myself in those circumstances?
Mm, mm. So, if somebody in our audience is in a situation where they're in corporate, I think there are many roads to how one looks at it. But if somebody's questioning, almost, and I'm almost with you, questioning their feminine energy, questioning in an environment that is really not serving them, and I mean, we call it burnout. And so first of all, the symptoms of burnout was just not being whole for you? Would you say that was a symptom of it?
Not being whole, feeling tired, feeling, energy depleted. So there are people where you just, like your team comes to you, or other people in the team, they come to you and you're like, oh, I can't face this again. Really, it's like, I'm fed up with it. But back then, I didn't know that burnout was a thing, it wasn't talked about that much. I'm like, of course that's not happening to me, like I'm not burned out. I'm well. I'm not depressed. I wake up every morning. I've got, and actually, it is a type of burnout.
But also that kind of, well, I'm doing my job and I'm doing a great job and I'm achieving, so I should be tired. So I think we start going, well, we accept the consequences of being in that heightened, and we know so much more about the nervous system now, and how that responds to these difficult push, and our body being depleted, our emotions being depleted, our mental body being depleted. And so I think the norm is to break through, otherwise we're weak.
Absolutely. And this got me into different practices of energy coaching as well, and understanding the energy, what charges up and what depletes us, and respecting this and knowing, what charges me and how do I make the best decisions. Because when you're about to change your life, you want to make sure that you are respecting yourself and that the decision is, you're sovereign in your decision making. And oftentimes we think and we make those decisions with our mind. We analyze options and we say option 1, option 2, blah, blah, blah. This is all the scenarios. And, when you work in corporate, you're used to doing this. But actually, in this case, this is the worst thing. The mind is the issue. So you're having to just put the mind away and really tune in to the body, really tune in to your sovereign way of decision making.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So making from the body, because if we think about your story, 3 months juicing, that sounds really scary to me. I can't even do a week of juicing. I get
Yes, you can.
physically, emotionally, mentally not very well. But and maybe that says something around listening to my body. But 3 months of juicing, that in itself must have been very tenacious, or did it just flow quite easily?
After the tip-off point, it just flew naturally. And I was enjoying those vibrations so much that I didn't want to go back to my old self. And I knew that this was helping me make the best decisions for me, because this is when I was in the process of negotiating, of deciding, of doing all of these things. And yes, I had also coaches, but I was a bit wary about their approach because it was still a very corporate approach somehow. And I'm like, nah, this doesn't feel right. And for me, what really shifted is this reconnection with values that I had completely lost, and re-seeing what feels right for me and what doesn't feel right for me. When am I aligned? When am I in my truth? And when am I not?
Mm-hmm. And would this be what you would share with somebody, or what else would you share with somebody, if they are really curious and they're listening to this and they're going, I'm in that situation? What advice would you give them, if they are seeking? Really, what advice would you give?
So in those cases, first, it's hard to know how our body reacts, what is a typical yes for us, what is a no, not now. I use things like human design and different tools to understand our energy, the purpose, and so on. And I would say getting help on this is always useful initially. And then once we start to find this, is how do we nurture it and continue with it? And yeah, for me, those tools like human design, like the Mayan archetypes, all these archetypes really help us understand ourselves, where we're at in our lives, what is next for us. I discovered afterwards psychic development, and I love psychic development. For me, it's a hygiene in my week, in my routine, and this also helps really, yeah, sense check where we're at and give us a reality check. So it's important to keep these check-in points between ourselves and to seek external help as well in those points, because it's always easier to see things in others than it is to see them in ourselves.
Absolutely. So checkpoints, get some help. And then what I heard loud and clear is listen to your body, listen to what's going on, and not that busyness. For me, your story was, and I know now, even for myself, when I'm avoiding something, I tend to make myself so busy that there's no time to for reflection. And clearly that when you stopped and you went to Sri Lanka for 3 weeks, it all stopped. And I also think in this day and age of technology, we are consumed by the busyness of our telephone. And I think it's a double-edged sword because it's a form of connection today, but also it consumes us. So I don't know why I'm saying that, and maybe somebody's listening. It's like, how busy are you with your phone, and how often do you have time to surrender?
Absolutely. Just to add to this, that during my Ayurvedic retreat, it was like no phones, no nothing. You could have access if you went to the lobby. It was really encouraged not to do it. And for most of the 3 weeks, I just didn't touch it. It's just at the end when I was ready to say, hey, I'm quitting, that I picked it up.
Amazing. Amazing. Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and the journey you have walked, and the courage, and the continuing to courage in all the work that you're doing, and, you know, bringing the energy in, teaching, one-on-one facilitation. Your contribution is really important. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing with our audience. And everyone, if you enjoyed this, please give us a thumbs up on whatever platform you're listening to us, as well as sharing it with those who might benefit. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you, everybody. And thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Cindy. Thanks, everyone.